what is Joule? Joule is a database software that was developed by me over the course of 10 years or more, actually more than 10 years. It started off with a very small database of 75 persons. Data was acquired from a Lexicor NeuroSearch 24. And unless you've been in this field a long time, you don't even know what that is. But 20 years ago, that was the gold standard. There was no Discovery. There was no Atlantis. The equipment that we have now didn't exist. And so I began to acquire data. Now, why? Because I was not happy just simply looking at a database and not knowing why the theta is 3 standard deviations above the mean. How does that play out in amplitude? Because we never received amplitude. That didn't say, well, 3 standard deviations means that theta is 15 microvolts. It never at CZ. We never had anything like that. I wanted to know for myself so that when I could teach the subject, I would be sure. So the mission statement of Joule is to provide easily understood EEG data that can be applied by clinicians. So the software is not for researchers, but it's strictly for clinicians who are in the field treating clients. Our mission is to make it as user-friendly as possible, which is why I'm always open to hearing individual suggestions, which is why some of the changes I have now have happened, because people said, I want it different. And so I made it different. So responsivity to users is critical. Now, what about the database itself? If you're familiar with Joule database software, you know that I show QEEG Pro database software as well, which has been validated and has an FDA 510K. Joule does not. So personally, I use NeuroGuide, NeuroSearch, NeuroGuide Lifespan Database, excuse me, which has the FDA 510K. I use QEEG Pro, which has the FDA 510K, and I have my database. So what I did is I made sure that the results coming from my database were compatible with NeuroGuide and QEEG Pro. If anything produced by my database seemed out of line, I found out why by acquiring more data, and I made the adjustment. And so even though it doesn't have the FDA 510K, it's validated through comparison of 2 other databases with the 510K. Furthermore, Joule provides you with QEEG Pro. So you always can go back and forth and look at the 2 databases. Another thing that's important for Joule users is that I promote manual editing and artifacting of the EEG. So in speaking to users, and I do it all the time, who do not do their own editing, but simply rely on automatic editing, they are often ignorant of the meaning of the EEG, which means that they're unable to identify possible cases of sleep apnea. They're not able to identify BORTs, bursts of rhythmic temporal theta. They're not able to see that theta in the frontal lobes as a presentation for an adult is abnormal. They're not able to see mu waves at C3, C4 with eyes open, which are a clear indication of Asperger's or autism. And they're often ignorant about spike in waves when they're important and when they're not. And also, if we can look at the raw EEG, if we're used to editing, we can understand more about our client even before we see the map. And so by insisting on manual editing, I'm promoting professionalism. And so you know where the EMG is because you've seen it. That's just one example. Now, the new Joule, this latest release, emphasizes 2 levels of usage. Level number 1 is the simplified version. And the simplified version of Joule is just what it says. You combine an online questionnaire, which we'll talk about more. You combine that with processed QEEG data, and it produces protocols, and the protocols can be created immediately, which is a new feature of the new Joule, which I will demonstrate, of course. The second level of Joule is for advanced users who want to create their own protocols, which is a fine thing to do, and they want to explore different methods of achieving the same results. So one of the complaints that I've had, and that I was very responsive to, is there are some new users who just basically want to know what to do. Tell me the protocol I'm supposed to use. And that, surprisingly, many people were interested in that, especially when they were getting started. So it wasn't that surprising. So the new Joule just simply says, do this on the simplified level. On the second level, it's different because it allows you to explore it on your own and decide for yourself what you wish to do based on your experience. And we're going to show you the two different levels and how they work. One of the things that I want to mention about Joule that's important is Joule is cost effective. It's approximately half the cost of other database processing software. And there's no limitations on Joule's protocols or brain mapping activities. And so that makes it easier on your pocketbook. And so you can spend actually thousands of dollars every year getting data processed, or you can get Joule every year for $5.95 after the initial purchase. So it's cost effective. Now, what about updates? In the past, if you've been a Joule user, updates came when you came in contact with me and I just showed them to you. Or of course, when you resubscribed. But now updates, every new update will be emailed to all users. So as long as you know how to load the software and install it, the next update I have, which will be soon after this workshop, you're going to get a copy. So you don't have to wait. You don't have to ask me for it. I'll just send out a mass email to everyone who is a subscriber. So that can be very handy. Now, we're going to begin with a simple review of how we process a file. And we have an iPhone 49 Beth. I bet you that's Beth Millet. That's my guess. Is that Beth Millet? I don't know. She's not talking yet. Okay. So it's nice to see old faces. I'm sorry, I'm digressing. So let's talk about how the process of using Joule works. So we're going to start by opening up Brain Avatar. And of course, I'm going to have to share with you my screen. And everybody should be seeing my messy screen right now, correct? All right, by your smiles, I think I am. So I'm going to open up Brain Avatar. So when we begin, well, I'm going to start right from the beginning because some of you folks have never done any EEG work with BrainMaster. We're going to click Folder Selections, create a new folder, and we're going to call this Workshop Test 44. Create and select settings. And what we are selecting are 19-channel discovery, high resolution, no limit QEEG assessment with filters. Now, if you use, let's go to BrainMaster. If you use BrainMasters, for example, if you use this one with impedances and not with filters, it will yield incorrect results with Joule. You must have filters. And if you have it with impedances only, you will discover that all of your clients will have elevated delta because the data has not been filtered. So rather than guessing, everybody has these two programs. This is for acquisition. This is for review. So if I click on the acquisition file and open it, then I put the client's age, and we're starting with eyes closed. And we are now ready to acquire the data. So I'm going to click go. And since no one is hooked up, we're not going to go over the process of doing a QEEG, how to put the cap on. But notice up here, it says eyes closed. And that's important. When is this window important? It's only important when we're doing a QEEG or when we're doing QEEG Pro Z-scores. If you are not doing a QEEG, if you're not using it for QEEG Pro Z-scores, this window means nothing. Okay, so this window means nothing unless you're doing QEEG Pro Z-scores or you're doing a QEEG data acquisition. So now that I've done 16 seconds with eyes closed, I'm going to change this to eyes open right up here, and I'm going to click go. Now, what did I not click? I did not click the space bar. If you click the space bar, you will sabotage the results for Joule. Do not use the space bar. And since I acquired 16 seconds, I am now going to do 16 more seconds for a total of 32 seconds. Does it have to be exact? No. So how long do we acquire data for? Well, at a minimum, 2 to 3 minutes. Now, that's if the data are fine, because we need at least 1 minute of good data for editing. If the data are poor, we might acquire 5 minutes. We might even acquire 10 minutes. Now, if you're doing research, or if this case might come to court for a court hearing, you will need 10 minutes. And all your impedances must be 5 ohms or less. But if you're not going to court and you're not doing a research paper to be published, 2 to 3 minutes is just fine. So it's something to keep in mind. And in those 3 minutes, you know there must be at least 1 minute of quality data. Otherwise, you have to keep recording. All right, so what am I going to do? I'm going to close Avatar. And the next thing I do is I go to Avatar Studies. And this was Workshop Test 44. And notice what I have. Workshop Test 44, eyes closed. Workshop 44, Test 44, eyes open. Notice that there are 184 kilobytes of data, which is nowhere near enough. Typically, our data will be at least 1,800 to 2,000 kilobytes or more. So sometimes you're wondering, was this a test one that I did? Just look at the kilobytes. And if the kilobytes are 1 to 200 kilobytes, then it was just a test. It has no value. Our real recording should be at least 1,800, over 1,800 kilobytes, typically 2,000 if possible. So I know that there's one eyes closed reading. I know there's one eyes open reading. I can take the cap off my client's head because I know I have this data. And notice they were labeled correctly, eyes closed and eyes open. All right, so now we chose the right filters. And now what we're going to do is we're going to review a real EEG, not the bogus one I just did or the guinea pig one. And so I'm going to open up Avatar again. Whoops, I think I better share my screen first. No, I still am. Good. I'm going to open up Avatar again. And I'm going to go to folder selections, and I'm going to select a folder that I prepared in advance. And so first we have the correct folder, step 1. Step 2, we put in the correct settings, which are Jules' new settings. Now, what's new about them? It's beta 6, and I'm going to show you. So if we go to setup and bands, beta 6 is 30 to 31 hertz. It used to be 28 to 32. Why did I change it? Because when there is a very narrow band at 30 hertz, it is fairly easy to identify surface EMG. Why did I do it now? Because I wanted to create protocols based on QEEG Pro data, but not based on EMG, based on real data. And one of the things I came up against is when I was starting to create protocols automatically with QEEG Pro, that the protocols were wrong. They were based on high Z-scores that were generated because of muscle tension or surface EMG. And so this allows me to identify EMG and dampen it. Now, dampen does not mean fix. This means that the majority of sites that have EMG will be identified and will be dampened, and your report will be much more accurate. On the one hand. On the other hand, if you have 5 or 6 sites with EMG, first of all, you can't dampen it because we don't have enough good data to base our dampening on. And second of all, it means your recording is very poor. All right, so that's the reason for that. So step number 1, we load the correct folder, which was 0001 workshop down here on the lower right-hand corner. Second, we load in Jules settings, the new ones. And now third, we're going to open up some data. Now this is real EEG. And we will start. Let's start with one with EMG. Now this recording is loaded with EMG. And I'm going to change the background. And you can see from the background that FP1, F7, FP2, F4, C4, F8, T4 all have issues with EMG. Now, when you have a file like this, what's the first thing you do is you go to the end and you try to see if it gets better. So did it get better or did it get worse? Does anybody have a comment?
It's worse.
It got worse, yeah. So I'm going to limit my editing to the first half of the recording. And it's still bad, but I'm avoiding the worst part. So my discovery is plugged in and I am editing. And that is I'm clicking on the screen and moving my mouse from left to right. And I'm selecting good data. Now you might say, oh, the EMG is not good. I don't have any choice. If I don't select the EMG data, then I will have nothing. You cannot select less than 1 second. How do I know what 1 second is? If you go to the bottom of the screen, do you see the green patches? I'm going to right click on it, and that patch was 7.91 seconds. If it's less than 1 second, Joule will not process it properly. Other than the EMG, by the way, this data are pretty good. So what do you think? Do you think this client might have an anxiety disorder? I think so. Now notice what's happening. The EMG is even getting more extreme. And so I bypassed that one area. And the data are fairly good, except for the EMG. I chose this one area that's a minor spike. It's a glitch. It's a hiccup. It doesn't mean anything. When there's true spike and wave activity, it has friends or multiple sites. It's the same thing with this site here. That's not typical. It's atypical, so I did not select it. And of course, there's an eye movement, and I'm not selecting that. And I'm selecting this. And in my book, in chapter 13, it has some good examples. Now, Matt, you had some questions or a question, please.
Yes, the numbers, so like on the current screen, you see 71, 72, 73. I was just trying to determine if that was seconds or if that was how that was. What is that? What are the numbers?
Excellent question. All right, so you see where it says 74 down here?
Yeah.
All right, I'm at 74, and that's why it says 74. What we want is an actual value of how many seconds that we have acquired. That's something I've been asking Brainmaster for 5 years. I'm still waiting.
So it's not giving a
total
running tally?
No, it isn't. The only thing you can do, I'll show you this. If you go list markers, it will show you all your markers individually and how long each one was. List markers. And so if you want to add them all up, that's the total. What happens is when you begin editing, you actually begin to know how much you have. And right now, I know I have very close to a minute or more. Because I know, like, this is how many? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 10 seconds per page. So I know I have selected enough.
Okay, and also if you have it, you wanting to get at least a minute of good data, but if you have more than a minute, that's okay as well.
That's okay.
Okay.
But what some clinicians do, and when they're new, they'll do things like this. And this is a waste of time. And did you hurt anything? No. But what I look for are longer stretches of data. Now, notice what's happening to the EMG at FP1. It's getting a little bigger. And I know, because I peruse the whole area, that the EMG is going to get worse and worse and worse. Can we all see that? FP1, FP2, look at how bad it is. And so I'm not interested. It's getting worse. I'm going to stop right here. I know I have a minute of data or more. Do I want to take this little piece here? I can. I don't have to. So it's all going to average out and be what it should be. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to analyze the data. I'm going to select a small portion, analyze the whole file, only the sections marked good. On the left, I'm clicking everything that I have in my login passkey. This is the age. By the way, if this age is wrong, QEEG Pro results will be wrong. If you ever notice that QEEG Pro and Joule looks totally different, it means it's the wrong age. And it wasn't corrected right here when it should have been. And you have to do Excel XML. So you know this is an eyes open recording. Now, notice it says eyes closed there. Here's a review question. Does that mean anything? Nothing. I'm not recording EEG and I'm not doing Z-score training. Those words mean nothing right now. So this is an eyes open recording that we are reviewing, age 67. Only the sections marked good, the whole file. Now, once in a while, once in a blue moon, you have a perfect recording with a few epochs that are bad. And then I use mark those sections as bad. But I almost never do that. It does happen though. All right, I'm going to run the analysis. Okay, the analysis is run. And now I'm going to, now this was, the name of this was quadruple one workshop. So if I look in Avatar Studies at quadruple, whatever it is, one, you'll notice that there is an analysis file. Nope, I'm in the wrong folder. No, that's the right folder. It's right here. Now I am going to match that because I have multiple individuals in this folder. And because of that, I have to change the name so I don't get confused because we'll be looking at these other individuals. So I made sure that this matched this so I cannot get confused. So if you have the ability to change the name, which is easy to do, it will really help you at times when you want to identify something important. So if this had just been one folder, I would not have needed to do this. You're seeing something I'm doing because this is a workshop. This is not a skill that you need to do. If you're just doing one client, you don't need to do this. All right, so now I'm going to open up Joule. And we're going to load in, let me get this black out of the way. We're going to load in a QEEG Pro Joule report. And the SEMG analysis is right here. I labeled it so I couldn't get confused with the other one that was in there. And we're going to open it. They were an adult. And we're going to give them the name that I gave them on the file, SEMG. And now, what if we did automatic processing? We only click automatic processing if we have done, or our client has done, the online questionnaire, which we're going to demonstrate later. I'm going to click that now. I'm going to go into the workshop. And what we're seeing is a JSON file, JSON. And I'm going to click the anxiety results. By the way, if you have JSON files that go back more than 2 weeks, you have to discard them because we had to make changes. Only current JSON files should be used. I'm going to click open and we're going to combine the JSON file questionnaire in which the client said they had predominantly anxiety. We're going to combine that with the XML. And what are we going to get? Okay, so we have the symptoms that they chose. Let's just start with the beginning. All right, so here's the QEEG. This says MAPS. Does everybody see it? MAPS. So what is there in MAPS? QEEG Pro, Joule, QEEG Pro Loretta, QEEG Pro ROIs, QEEG Pro CERT bands, Joule's S Loretta, Joule's bands. All the maps that we have are right under the tab that says maps. This is a change if you're a Joule user. This is different. Now, looking at QEEG Pro, we're noticing something that it says in the upper right-hand corner, SEMG damping activated. So we know that it was activated. So there's no questions. It was done for Joule and it was done for QEEG Pro. Now, let's talk about the simplified usage. Let's say that we're just getting started with Avatar and Joule, and we want to know what to do. So we go to reports, you click on the clinician report, and you see where it says anxiety, beta type. Rather than even discussing it, I'm just going to click create Z-scores. There's your Z-score training protocol. It's already made for you. Yes, Matt.
The client age is showing 9 on the one screen. Is that
That's because the JSON file said that.
okay? Okay.
Okay, so I did a bunch of JSON files that have nothing to do with the client.
Thank you.
So these are just old files that I use in testing. So so now let's just go over what I did. I could make this QEEG Pro Z-score training protocol myself, or I could just click on create Z-scores and it's right there for me. Because I don't like to use a pencil and paper, I'm going to copy the name of this. But you don't have to do what I just did. You don't have to copy that. You can just write down the name of it. I'm going to click on, it's going to open up Avatar automatically. And hopefully everybody can see Avatar. And we're going to give this person a name. And then I'm going to click paste. And there's the name of the protocol. And there's the person's age. I'm done. That's it. I'm ready to do my first client with Z-score training. I combined the questionnaire with the analyzed data, and here's the protocol, and I'm ready to go. Yes, Monique. I can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I got you.
When you chose to import eyes open, how do we discern which file we're putting into Joule, eyes open, eyes closed, if we edit both files?
All right, good question. Good question. So let me close Avatar for a moment. And let's go back. Got to get this out of the way. Load report. You good? Load Joule report. I'm going to go to the same one. And notice it says SEMJ analysis, eyes open. But there's more. I got to select it first. Now I'm going to move the Zoom label out of the way. Monique, can you read up here?
The SEMG analysis, eyes open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's your verification. You did it right. So notice it says eyes open there. What does it say over here on the right side of the screen?
Eyes open.
Right. I know this is eyes open. Okay. So now my programmer finished this version at 5:30 this morning. So in the clinician report, oh, there it is. It says sites identified with EMG. It says FP1. Evidently, the EMG that I chose was not that great, so only FP1 was identified. Now we have the clinician report, but there's no symptoms because I didn't combine it with the JSON report. The JSON report is the online test. So I am going to add in a symptom. Yes, Deanna.
You mentioned with the new JSON or having the new JSON reports, will that actually, so every time I load in a JSON report, it does not load in the symptoms. Does that fix that now?
No, that's all fixed.
That's all fixed now. Okay.
That's fixed. And that's why we
Okay.
had to change the online questionnaire. Not so much the
Okay.
questions, but certain technical features of it. So it works now. And we've experimented with it
perfect.
over and over again.
Thank you.
So notice this is the site that was changed with FP1. This has EMG on the client that I just chose. If we want to just start with creating Z-score training protocols, we just click here and they're right here. Now, what's the protocol on the bottom? That's Jules Z-score training, if we want to use it. T4 minus FP4. And without creating an actual file and putting it in temporary sessions, it's right here. So this is ready now for Jules Z-score training with one bipolar montage. Typically, when we train for anxiety disorders, we often resort to bipolar montages. And notice that the bipolar montage pivots off of T4. Inside T3 and T4, inside the temporal lobes, just beneath them, it houses the amygdala. That's why we're pivoting off of T4, because there's where the amygdala is. And now we're connecting the amygdala T4 with F4, which is the anterior location of the insula. And the insula is very much involved with anxiety. And so Jules chose these sites based on the data. So if we started with QEEG Pro Z-scores, which is a fine thing to do, and the client's not progressing, we could move right to this protocol right here. Now, we need to answer another question. On Jules' Eyes Open Z-score training, they cannot be changed to eyes closed. I think I need to get this out of the way. The difference between QEEG Pro and Jules. And it's a big difference. So if I open up that protocol, now we're in Avatar. And I'm going to go to Settings and Z-scores. And what does this say? Not using Z-scores. And I told you this was Z-score training because Jules Z-score trainings aren't listed. So where are the data? Let me show you. Can everybody see my mouse? I'm going to move it to the right. Please watch it. Please watch it. It's still going. That's the Z-scores. They're embedded in the event wizard. That is Jules Z-score training, which is rigid. It has to be eyes open. We cannot change the bands. You can in QEEG Pro. It must be eyes open. And the bands are fixed. The age is fixed by when you open up the report and you said the client is 44, then that's the age. Now, what else can you do with Joule Z-scores that you can't do with QEEG Pro is, of course, you can combine photic stim. All right, it's right there. Is it required? No. Is it an option? Yes. You would need to have an echo with the discovery in order to drive this, an echo and photic stim glasses, and you would need stim flash software. All right, so now I want to go back to what the report is saying for a moment. So you might be saying, well, why are all these protocols here? Well, let me tell you a story, which I've often told, so many of you heard it before, and if you've heard it before, I apologize. My son has a hearing impairment from birth, a 20% hearing loss, and when it came time to go to school, we took him to the local schoolhouse that had several hundred students, and we asked, how do you teach reading? And the teacher said, first grade teacher said, this is the method we use. And I said, well, what if that method doesn't work? And she says, everybody learns that way. So then we drove out of our way to found a 2-room schoolhouse, and we asked the teacher, how do you teach reading? Well, I use that standard method, and if that doesn't work, I try another method. And if that doesn't work, I try another method. If none of those work, I put the child on my lap and I read to them. Which school did I send my hearing impaired child to? Now, which kind of neurofeedback provider do you want to be? Like the first teacher in the big school, or like the second teacher in the second school, who was the most awarded teacher in the state of Vermont? So you start out with QEEG Pro Z-scores, and the client, after 5 sessions, is doing just great. You've kept track of them through progress reports in Joule, or maybe the Beck Depressive Inventory, the Burns, or some other inventory, and they're doing better. You're happy. That's great. You have a rationale to continue. But now you've done 5 sessions, and the client's saying, I'm no better. I'm not sleeping more. I'm not feeling well. Okay. So now you know it's not working. So you're like the 2-room schoolhouse teacher. You're saying, okay, I'll try Joule Z-scores. I mean, they're right here anyway. And that doesn't work. And now we say, okay, we're going to go to bipolar. These are amplitude training, the bipolar tweak, which are very similar to Seaburn-Fisher's protocols. But you know what they have that's interesting is when you set up a protocol, you're always wondering, what are my inhibits and what's the best reward? Well, the software says these are your best inhibits, and that is your best reward. It tells you what to do. In the next version of Joule, we're going to set these up so it says that in the name of the protocol. It's not going to change the protocol. It's just going to give you those inhibits and the reward in the protocol. And there's something new that I've done with the sum squash. In the past, we've done 1 filter sum squashes where you inhibit just 1 filter like theta, 4 to 8 hertz, period. Client gets better, they don't. More and more, we began to see the clients were not responding the way we wanted them to. So I decided to have a 2-filter sum squash. Notice the inhibit is beta 4 and the reward is alpha 1. It tells you what to do. And we're going to go over how to change this. Does this client qualify for beta SMR training? No. Do they qualify for C4 SMR? Yes. What about HEG NIR? Don't use it. What about HEG PIR? Yeah, it's okay to do it. Now, if we're using photic stim, we would pick out 10 hertz with Joule Z-score training protocol. If we were doing low frequency training, these are some common montages for low frequency training. And what does symptom specific mean? It means that this is what people in the industry usually use, especially if they're not doing Z-scores. That's how they'll train this person. So if you want to know what's typically done, that's what you do. The other thing you can do is you can read the text on the right. The right describes the problem, typical EEG interventions, questions that you can ask the client. and additional homework and treatments that are possible to go with this disorder. This is a clinician report. We don't hand it to the client. All right. Matt, excuse me.
Do you, is there a recommended progression of where to start with a protocol, and, or is that just over time and experience where you can
So
start?
in general, if I have a client that does not have a severe anxiety disorder, I'll use Z-score training. But if they have PTSD, I'm going to be using, for example, let me just click PTSD. So what's typically used is the T4 minus P4 van der Kolk. What about alpha theta training? We never use that in the early sessions. This actually should be at the end of the list, not the beginning. It's something I'm going to change. The backup protocol is the dual bipolar montage. And this is a typical T3 minus T4, which is like Sieber and Fisher. She might do T4 minus P4 followed by T3 minus T4 or vice versa. The protocols are there. Now, these are symptom specific. In the future, I'm going to have another button that says create amplitude training, and they'll be there. But for now, okay, you'll have to create those protocols in the knowledge base yourself. Now, that doesn't mean you're doing it from scratch, but it means you have to go to the knowledge base. So let's say we wanted to get Bessel-van der Kolk's protocol, T4, P4, T4 minus P4 van der Kolk. It's right there.
Oh, that's
No
really
mysteries.
Nice. Okay.
Now,
I was wondering if we'd have to manually create.
No, that's not what Juul's about.
Okay.
And then we create the protocols. And if I'm not going to copy the name. I'm just going to click on it and make it a temporary folder. So run the temporary session and van der Kolk. It's right there. You're done. So, but now that can be scary to do all this for some new users. And so consequently, I don't want to scare anybody. So what we're going to do is when we go to reports, we go to the clinician report. If you're saying, I don't know what to do, I'm just getting started. Okay, there you go. You're started. It tells you what to do. So one of the complaints I had was that I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. There's too much data here. I can't think like that teacher in the two-room schoolhouse. Fine. It's okay. 20 some odd years ago, I got started. I didn't know what to do. So, there's no put down here. There's nothing pejorative. It's just a matter of, okay, if you're just getting started, you want somebody to say, give it to me. I'll watch and see if they do better. And if they don't do better, well, I'll try Juul's, which is more specific. But remember, in this list, I have several options for Juul. Monopolar and bipolar. I have amplitude training, and I have this. And on this one, on this particular client, for these particular sites for anxiety PTSD, it even says that beta SMR could be used without making the client worse. But it tells you because it figured it out that it won't make them worse. Yes, Matt.
Sorry for so many questions, but would there be ever a possibility that when you, like, for instance, select anxiety PTSD, that it would hierarchically or based on best practice recommendations sort them in a different way than if you had selected just generalized anxiety?
Yeah, if you pick anxiety, like anxiety, let's say anxiety, period.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you will see that the protocols, well, actually they're the same because this is based on numbers, okay? And as far as these are different places to train than it was before, based on QEEG Pro's database. And so now what are you supposed to do with anxiety? My experience is that bipolar montages are a little bit more effective than Z-score training. And Sieber and Fisher will agree with me on that. But would it be wrong to start with QEEG Pro Z-scores? No. So you're saying, well, if the QEEG Pro Z-scores training doesn't work, what should I do next? Well, that's what you should do next. Now, if those two don't work, you're saying, well, what should I do after that? That you're looking for that, what should I do? One after the other. And so while I don't have another button with the key amplitude training protocols yet, and I will have it, for right now, some of that depends on experience. All right. And so,
like when you had on the last one, you had selected the Van der Kolk
right.
protocol as a go-to before much of the other ones. I didn't know if there was thoughts of putting that maybe in a hierarchical way at the top, saying this is recommended.
If the Van der Kolk doesn't work because the client's getting over-aroused, I go to the dual bipolar montage. The dual bipolar montage was formed by doing a bipolar montage database with 22 normal adults. And what we discovered is that almost no client has reacted negatively by using the dual bipolar montage, and almost everyone gets stabilized. The difference between that and Van der Kolk's is two differences. Difference number one, it's not been researched. This is just 10 to 15 years of clinical, observation, talking to clinicians over a decade. And number two, the client needs to have elevated Z-scores. So when the Z-scores are low, the dual bipolar montage does not work as well as Van der Kolk's. Now there's another factor. If Van der Kolk's T4 minus P4 is a little bit too aggressive, by all means use Jules T4 minus P4 Z-score training. Now, what does that mean? It means you don't have to tweak anything. It finds the right reward. It finds the right inhibits. You don't even have to think about it. It's done for you. And I have a clinic in Spain, and they had a lot of technicians. And what they found out was they were using bipolar montages like Sieber and Fisher, and they were tweaking it. And the results were good. And then they went to the bipolar montages for technicians who knew very little, and they were all having success, except it was a little bit slower than the amplitude training. And what the head of the clinic says, well, no, we're just going to do that because the technician will just do it. I don't have to depend on them knowing how to tweak. It'll adjust itself. And so that's their model right now. They're just using those protocols instead of amplitude training. So that's why sometimes you'll see with anxiety disorders that I'm recommending a bipolar montage, Z-score training. Remember, when we use that type of protocol, it's especially effective with the amygdala that is embedded inside the temporal lobes. We often pivot off of T4. So if the client is over-aroused, what I discovered personally with PTSD, going back to that and just talking about that for a while, is I discovered that.
I think I'm gonna get cut out of this because.
All right, somebody's going to have to mute themselves, or I have to mute everybody.
Yeah.
All right.
Hold on. I gotta do it both. I got two of them. I gotta leave.
Right. All right, so they're muted. That's fine. So what I've done with PTSD, you notice that one of the suggestions is C4 minus P4. So I've had experience with some clients who were over-aroused with everything. And I just did C4 minus P4, and they did fine. Did it cure them? No, but did it completely stabilize them? Yes. Just that one protocol. That's why it's there. So there's the problem. You want to use Van der Kolk, it doesn't work. You go to the dual bipolar, it's not working. You might use T3 minus T4 tweak to stabilize them. That might work. And then I have the C4 minus P4, very mild. Or you might say, maybe ISO-UR is going to work. And there's the typical protocols for that. So this is the issue we have when we're not experienced. We start off with standard protocols. And then, yes, I'm going to have another button that's going to be a little bit more useful with amplitude training. But the difficulty is that sometimes we have to know what we're doing and we need experience. So one of the things I did in the knowledge base that's a little bit helpful is I have a tab that says PTSD. And now notice in this one, I have the alpha rebound. So Sieber and Fisher and some others have worked to develop this. And so, and here is some suggestions on training PTSD. I have it in the tabs. So it's right there. So, and if you're training with ADHD, there's suggestions and text on how you can do that. So I have additional information in the knowledge base.
Sorry, John, can I just ask, was that your own dual bipolar montage for the
Yes.
PTS? I always found that so helpful.
I know, and you're not the only one. And it's been used, like I said, for well over a decade. And it's the go-to protocol for a lot of clinicians when the client is overwhelmed. An out-of-control teenager, like they're 17 years old, dual bipolar montage, PTSD, dual bipolar montage, panic disorder. It all has value. If the amplitudes or the Z-scores are elevated, if the client basically has a blue map, then now you're into using amplitude training or using Bessel-van der Kolk's. So you actually have to do that. Now, another thing that I did not tell you, which I need to, is on QEEG Pro. Now, let me see if I can find an example. And I'm going to go here. I think this example will do it. I think this is a fairly blue map, but I might be mistaken. I apologize if it is. Okay. So other than 01, where do you train this client? Right? So does everybody see over here where it says P and C? So if the power analysis, let's say we did Asperger's. If I click C, it's going to base the protocol on coherence. So if we go back to the clinician report, it says PZ, P4, P3, O1. If we go back to the maps, that was based on coherence. Whereas if I go to power, we'll see that it is O1, O2, PZ, P4. So if we have a very low power map, we might say, I need to train this client with coherence because coherence problems are robust, whereas amplitude problems are not. So that means you have a judgment. You're looking at a map that has a lot of coherence issues, but almost no power issues. And you might, with QEEG Pro, decide, okay, I'll do coherence instead of power. It automatically changes in the clinician report. And again, looking at the clinician report, there it is. We have the new protocols, all ready to make, all ready to go. So that choice is important because there are lots of times we have maps in which the power is like, what is this? Now, typically amplitude training is great because we can reward a specific frequency. But if you're saying, no, I want to stick with Z-scores, And that's fine. Then we just switch to coherence. So now with experience, okay, with experience, we might say, okay, I know that the sites for coherence are much better for this client with Asperger's. So we might, with experience, say, I know that the coherence training is better. But without experience, we can just simply say, where's the gold? Where's the real problem? Does it look like it's reflected in 0102? Probably not, because that's not technically part of the default mode network. And so by including P3, P4, and PZ, we're right in the default mode network. It's more likely the coherent sites are more apropos. Yes, a little experience is involved, but it gives you the option of doing that. So any questions on that?
So John, if we're switching to coherence and then we go to QEEG Pro's S. Loretta, is it going to give us S. Loretta coherence recommendations?
No. Let me explain. If you load S. Loretta coherence data, because you have the connectivity suite, you paid $500 extra. Let me explain. The file is 200,000 kilobytes, not anywhere from 8,000 to 20,000 kilobytes. It's a huge file. Now, the software does not have the capacity to go through the thousands. Can you imagine how many thousands of connections there are and do that? So what does the software do? Full QEEG Pro protocols. So what it does, in answer to your question, is, now I'm one step ahead of myself. Let's go to QEEG Pro. Okay, and there's S. Loretta, and there's the ROIs. So you might say, wow, how can I treat this best? So what we're going to do is on Share Joe, this client, Show Jer, is I'm going to show you another button in Joule. I didn't need to close it. You asked an advanced question, Trevor. You did it. So now I have to show something advanced. So you want to use S. Loretta with Joule. Joule's all ready to do it. And it will do things that Brainmaster software does not do. Okay, so let's go back to that same person. That was eyes open or closed. I apologize, I can't remember. I think it was eyes open. Oh, I clicked the wrong button. Okay, I don't have to close Joule though. You know how you have to open and close Avatar a lot? You don't have to do that with Joule at all. What I should have clicked was S. Loretta. And why do we click S. Loretta? Because it gives you an extra feature that S. Loretta users want. So you have S. Loretta button. And you're going to see a difference in the software. Okay, so we can choose the Asperger's here or on another page, it doesn't matter. And now I'm going to go to QEEG Pro's S. Loretta. And notice what you can do. It's called target size. Do you want to train the whole head, or do you want to emphasize the hottest sites? So I'm moving the target size. 30%, 28%. Let's say I just want to train 20%. Well, it's picked it out, but there's more. Let's say you're saying, you know, I wouldn't recommend this, by the way, but let's say I just want to train beta sites. So notice in the upper right-hand corner, I'm going to remove delta, theta, and alpha, alpha 1 and alpha 2. I think training alpha is critical, by the way. But I just did this as a demonstration. So I selected the bands I want. I brought it down to 20% of the target size. And now I go to protocol, create QEEG Pro protocols. No, I have to do it for S-Loretta, excuse me. And now I'm in the discovery, create surface power. So it's picking 14 channels, or I could pick 19 channels. And I can pick a custom setting file, or I can pick out a standard one. So if I just create the file, there it is. It's now a file that can be created. It can be loaded into Joule, loaded into Brain Avatar through the read write settings option. And so I'm going to put that on the desktop. And I actually don't demonstrate this that often, so I have to apologize if I'm all thumbs here. So if you're in Avatar, see where it says read write? And you load protocol and settings. It's on the desktop because that's where I put it. And there it is, open. Okay, so now I'll go to ROI and and nothing happened. That was exciting. Okay, I don't know why it didn't show up. We did not try this feature with the upgrade of the new software, Trevor. But the way it works is it populates this whole page. And it populates the coherence too. And it obviously did not do that. I apologize for this. But now you told me something to tell my programmer. Sorry. So okay, I just wrote them. So that'll be fixed on the next one. Ordinarily, it would populate this page, and then you just begin training. It would also populate on all the sites that you had. It would do coherence between the sites you chose. Now, does that necessarily mean it's the worst coherence? No. So what you're saying is, and what you'd like to see, is if we could look at the coherence in between all these sites. And so Joule does not do that. But what it would do is train the coherence in the power sites that you selected. And now what it's also doing is it's focusing just on the 20% of the most important sites power-wise. So could there be a bigger issue? You know, well, you could make the target size bigger, and it'll just include more coherent sites. I think they're finding better success by targeting a smaller area with power. I think that's what I've been hearing. Trevor, how much Loretta training do you do?
Oh, good, quite a bit, John. But yeah, I'm sure by just increasing the target, we'll get more coherence area that way.
Yes, but let me get that fixed so it'll be the specific amount. So if you open it up, you'll actually see which coherence. You know, BrainMaster on that one list doesn't show all the coherence, even if it's been chosen. The list is too long. There are thousands of combinations. They can't even show it on that list. But what would happen is it wouldn't just be those combinations. It would just be the sites that we chose. I mean, the bandwidths. So unfortunately, we found a glitch in the software. And thanks to you, Trevor, we have something we can fix. Okay. All right, so let's move on here. Oh, one thing we did not do is on reports. So I loaded a report, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to load a comparison report. This one was eyes open that we picked, and now I'm going to pick the same one, eyes closed. Now, what's new about the new Joule is not only can you do this, but let's go to reports, and now we'll go to QEEG Pro comparison. And you can print this. So how do you print it? You go to Save Report. That's the QEEG Pro, and this is the Joule report. We're comparing eyes open with eyes closed. We can just put this right in the client's file. So let's say I went to Save Report, and let's say I clicked Save Comparison Report. Notice it opened up a folder, which is where I got, this is where I got ShowJare from, this folder. It brought me right back to my folders. And now it put in the comparison report into the folder for me. Joules and QEEG Pros is right there. So that's the third report. One of the things I didn't show you is when you do your first report, let's say we want to save this report. Save the report. So you see the report there, which you're used to seeing, but it did something else. Do you see where it is? It's in this correct 30 Hertz examples, but it says assessments. What it did was it created an assessment folder automatically for you to put future assessments into. So a lot of times I tell you, keep all your assessments in the same place. Now we're creating the folder for you to begin with. So you put your assessments in the QEEG folder. You take your data from the QEEG. And when you click Save the Report, it goes into the assessment folder. It does that automatically. So what does that mean with QEEG? What does it mean when it comes to damping? I wanted to explain that again. Let's say you did a map a year ago and it was full of EMG. And now you run it again with the new Joule. You'll say, wow, the map looks better now. Well, the reason for that is the SEMG has been damped, and Joule has also identified what sites needed to be damped. So you know which sites were changed. It's not a mystery. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the knowledge base. Now, when we talk about the knowledge base, we're talking about the advanced usage of Joule. I've already shown the simplified version. But before we begin this, does anybody have any questions on what we've discussed? Okay. So on the knowledge base, what can we do? So, for example, on the clinician report options, this has all the protocols that are in the clinician report. So it's limited to beta SMR, one filter sum squash, a tweak, and a 2 filter sum squash. It doesn't have, remember when you used to click on amplitude, it had like 10 protocols to choose from. Now it just has the protocols that are there. When you click on Z-scores, it gives you the option to make 4-channel Z-score training. Or if you go here, 6-channel Z-score training. Now, let's say you're looking for a generic S-Loretta template. Well, we have that there. Or if we're looking for Joule's Z-score training, 1-channel, 2-channel, 4-channel bipolar, you must select the correct age here, and then you will create the protocol. Now, what is the other options? All right, so the other options are, for example, if you've read about asymmetry training, you can do asymmetry training. It's all set, ready to go at those sites. If you wanted to do ratio training, for example, CZ theta to beta ratio training. Have you ever read about it in a book? Well, it's right there. It's often used for ADHD. And they also do the same thing with FZ, theta to beta ratio training. Now, this is advanced usage. These protocols are all made for you. Or you have a client that has a low or a high peak frequency. You can decrease or increase the peak frequency right there. It's all set up, ready to go. If you're looking at 1-channel training, if you just want to train at FZ. Now, there's another thing I didn't tell you. But remember, this is Atlantis. That's Atlantis. This is Discovery. If you have the new GP8E, there are the protocols right here. What if you have the older Atlantis 3.0? Well, that's wrong. On the older Atlantis 3.0, there's a 1-channel tweak. So you want to have, the client has the older software and you want to send them a protocol, it's right here. And that is for the Atlantis 3.0. I don't know if anybody's even seen these protocols before. See how different it looks? It's not a BDPB2 file. It loads automatically into Atlantis 3.0. So if you're doing remote training and you're looking for an easy way to do Atlantis 3.0 protocols, they're all right here. Not Z-score training, not that, but we're doing amplitude training, which is really what you would be doing with the older machine. So if you have a new machine and you're looking for protocols, so what did I do with the GP8E? that's different is now we have z-scores set up for the GP8E. Now, all the newer ones that I've done have made the correction in the GP8E so that it can be run automatically without making acquisition changes. The older protocols for the GP8E, you have to make acquisition changes. If you don't have the GP8E, what I said doesn't make any sense. If you do have it, you'll understand it. And so that's Brainmaster's new biofeedback machine. So that's, I'm trying to think. On EEG stats, one thing I wanted to show you is, now this green peak is at 0.1, it's 15 hertz. Let's say it was a bad electrode for the fun of it. I just normalized it for the most part. So we can normalize a single electrode if it's a bad electrode, and we can make the map look better. We have that feature. Now we have other features. There's co-modulation, and we should be familiar with the ratio review. Remember, heads that are all blue suggest anxiety, worry, or insomnia. And this is all part of the client report. We have coherence, peak frequency. Now you can see that this client does not have a peak frequency issue. And we finally have QEEG Pro data. So let's say you want to know the exact z-score at a specific site that QEEG Pro is using for surface. It's right here. So that is our rundown of Joule. And one of the biggest changes, I said, is the simplification of the tabs and the simplification of protocol making when you first get started. So before we call this to a close, does anybody have any questions?